In hopes of testing out the bird eye detect on the Sony a7 IV when I was at Belle Isle, I was confronted by one of the most exquisite and exotic species of bird imaginable, the Canadian goose. On my last few trips to the nature parks around my area to do bird photography, I've left feeling a little disappointed. I haven't seen the great blue heron, or any sandhill cranes, or any of the more interesting birds that I usually like to photograph. For the past month, it's been nothing but Canadian geese and seagulls, and I've noticed on my new Sony a7 IV using the Sigma 100 to 400mm lens, a lot of my shots have been out of focus, and I've been wondering if it's because instead of selecting bird for my subject, I've been selecting either auto or animal/bird for the subject. So I really wanted to test that out, and I was really hoping that instead of seeing the typical Canadian geese and seagulls, I might be greeted with something a little more interesting. But when we got out of the truck and approached the partially frozen Detroit River, there were Canadian geese as far as the eye could see. I admit I was feeling a little deflated. I almost didn't feel like bringing my camera out of the bag, but I did notice the way the sun was glinting off the icy river was interesting, and I thought maybe I'd take a few shots. When I brought the viewfinder up to my eye and I zoomed into 400mm, I slowly became mesmerized by the mannerisms of the Canadian geese. I watched one slide as it was moving across the ice, and I thought maybe I could get a couple interesting photographs, or maybe some video. My constant debate is whether to do videography or photography. I love them both so much. I decided to do a little bit of each. I know I missed some critical moments in the time it takes to switch between my photo and video settings, but I always feel so much better when I get home and have some video clips along with my photos. Canadian geese don't always have the best reputation here in Michigan. They poop everywhere, and on occasion they've been known to attack. Normally they don't attack unless you're getting too close to their nest or to their goslings, and they usually just flap their wings and hiss at you. But they have been known to peck.
A high schooler is attacked on a golf course, and the culprit is none other than a Canadian goose. These photos are currently going viral on social media. I don't mean to laugh. Yes, like I do.
Bird of prey.
Blissfield High School in Lenawee County, officials there saying that the golfers, wow.
If I'm ever alone on a trail that's completely blocked by geese, I usually look for a detour. I have noticed that Canadian geese are rather beautifully created. The color of their sleek black heads coordinates perfectly with their taupe bodies. Black complements taupe so smartly in design. When it comes to filming wildlife, I'm always using 120 frames per second, but when it comes to birds, I've noticed I could probably go with 60 frames per second. I don't need things slowed down that much. When filming a large flock of birds on the water, an issue that I've run into is how to frame my shot. Because my vision isn't the greatest, I have been known to focus on one or two birds doing completely mundane behaviors, while there's a bird behind them doing something incredibly spectacular, and I only notice it when I get home and see that bird in the background that's sort of out of focus, and I really wish I would have concentrated on that bird. Sometimes in hopes of not missing anything interesting, I tend to pan back and forth a little bit too much, and then I get home with disjointed footage. It would have been so much better just to frame up my shot, maybe stop down the aperture a bit to get more in focus, and just let the action play out in front of the camera. When I heard the flapping of wings, I decided to switch over to my photography settings for birds in flight. I had saved the shutter speed to 1/2000th. I was hoping maybe this time I could freeze the birds in action. I'm really tired of getting blurry birds in flight photos. I've come to realize that 400mm isn't always quite enough reach to capture the detail of a bird in flight. But I won't lie, I hate lugging around the 150 to 600mm Sigma lens. It always gives me a bit of neck and shoulder strain. I have been considering repurchasing the Sony 70 to 350mm APS-C lens that I used to have. I know an APS-C lens on a full-frame sensor isn't ideal, but it would give me up to 525mm of reach. And it's such a lightweight lens. After reviewing a few of the shots on my LCD screen and zooming in, I discovered there wasn't quite as much detail as I would like. I decided to switch back over to video and film it at 120 frames per second in S-Log 3. The one good thing about the Sony a7 IV is that when you film in 4K 120, it does an APS-C crop, so it did give me some extra reach, which I did appreciate. Now when I got home and reviewed the photos of the birds in flight on my 27-inch monitor, just as I expected, I wasn't quite impressed due to the lack of detail, but when I watched my slow motion clips of the birds in flight, I was pleasantly surprised. And then when I turned my gaze back on the frozen river, I noticed that one of the geese wasn't quite like all of the rest. She had a tuft of rusty brown feathers sticking up all over her head. I was trying to track her as she took off, but I fell a little short. But when I finally did get her in frame, I noticed that the eye detect really did lock on and do a nice job. The change in exposure was my biggest battle. I thought maybe this was some sort of a duck, but I couldn't quite be sure until I got home and was able to upload the photo on my Merlin app. When I clicked to identify the bird, it said it was a hooded merganser, but the bird it was showing me didn't look exactly like the one in my photo until I scrolled down and it said female hooded merganser. That matched up my bird perfectly. Needless to say, seeing this bird was a rare treat for me. I think I might have seen it one other time. The one lesson I've learned from this trip is that you can never predict what sort of species you might encounter. Even if you feel frustration in seeing the same common species over and over again, they're still worth photographing. You can learn so much from their mannerisms and behaviors, and the more you get out there, you increase your chances of encountering the more unusual species. Yesterday, when we went to Port Huron, the waterfront was full of seagulls, and I thought to myself, who needs another photo of a seagull? But I remembered seagulls are beautiful too, and then I noticed something black and white floating in the water that didn't look exactly like a seagull. I knew it had to be some sort of a duck. When I got home and looked it up on the Merlin app, it turned out to be a long-tailed duck. I really couldn't tell if it was a male or female long-tailed duck. I couldn't really see the tail feathers, and I guess when they have the longer tail feathers, it's a male, and the shorter tail feathers, it's a female. But whatever the gender, it's fascinating to look at. And once again, this had just confirmed the lesson I had learned, not to waste an opportunity of photographing birds. Even if you think they're just going to be common seagulls, there might be a more rare species waiting out there for you. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more photography-related content from a newbie like me. God bless.